There is very little information related to the birth and upbringing of Jack the Ripper. All we can go off are sources published by historians and journalists. The most popular theory states that Jack the Ripper may have been born in London. The justification behind this is that at the time, specific parts of London were deemed to be very poor and impoverished. One could argue that living in such a poor area could have been a motive to engage in murders due to frustrations over living conditions. At the same time, however, others dispute this and argue that Jack the Ripper lived outside of London because the murders involved with Jack the Ripper were very abrupt and fast. In terms of family life, again, very little is known. Experts claim a reason why murderers commit their actions could potentially be due to problems with parents and families, i.e. abuse and neglect, or just a lack of any sort of relation. In the case of Jack the Ripper, potentially any of these factors could have attributed to why he acted out on his crimes. Neglect can do a lot to anybody. Okay, enough rubbish. Using this sort of reasoning to justify murder is both problematic and outright illogical. Many people go through struggles in their life, whether that be with family or loved ones in general. However, this does not lead to them acting out such heinous crimes. We can only speculate as to how many murders Jack the Ripper actually committed. As per speculation, a relatively large amount of murders between 1888 and 1892 were attributed to Jack the Ripper. However, on record, only 5 of these murders have been specifically linked to a single murderer. Some of you may have heard of the Canonical Five, others may have not. But in essence, these 5 individuals murdered, whom are linked specifically to Jack the Ripper, are known exactly as that. The victims involved were as follows: Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. According to popular belief, all of the victims were prostitutes, and all but one, being Catherine, were murdered while soliciting on the street. There have been disputes in relation to whether these victims were in fact prostitutes or not. For example, British social historian Hayley Rubenhold has argued that Mary Nichols, Annie Chapman, and Catherine Eddowes were not prostitutes. Rubenhold strongly holds the belief that the reason why people assumed that these victims were prostitutes was as a result of prejudice and misogynistic traits of the Victorian era. Next, we will be talking about the absolutely horrific and brutal murders and the disgusting extent to which Jack the Ripper went in order to ensure these poor innocent victims died. From what we know via sources provided by journalists and historians, on each occasion when Jack the Ripper would murder a victim, he would slit their throat and the victim's body would be dismembered. On record and stated by the police at the time, on one occasion, half of a human kidney, potentially that of one of the innocent victims, was also cut out and for some sick and twisted reason posted to the police themselves. In addition, multiple taunts were made to the police, specifically via letters and notes, of which an individual referred to themselves as Jack the Ripper. These taunts would generally boast that Jack the Ripper was the murderer everyone claimed and suspected he was. These notes and letters have not been proven, however, to be from Jack the Ripper. However, speculation suggests it was. After the tragic events occurred, as you can tell, there was public uproar throughout the entirety of the United Kingdom. The public uproar was generally directed at the UK government, more specifically the Home Secretary, Sir Henry Matthews, and the London Police Commissioner, Sir Charles Warren. Progressively, whilst the murders took place, you would think that a large investigation would be taking place to find the culprit who was carrying out these vile acts. At the heart of the police force during the Victorian era, it is widely known that the police would instead prioritise prevention of crime rather than the solving of crime. The reason for this was due to the lack of resources available to the police. Little progress was made in relation to forensic. Fingerprint investigation was not discovered, and DNA was not readily available for usage to try and connect murders to single individuals. The only thing that the police force could use were clues, any clues linking to the crimes to individuals was the go-to action taken. However, in the case of Jack, aside from the occasional note sent to police boasting of murders, the clues were sparse. Over time, throughout the year 1888, the pressure of the police force applied by the public eventually led to the police commissioner resigning his role. As of today, although there have been suspicions of people relating to Jack the Ripper mystery, no specific individual has been directly linked to being Jack the Ripper. Hence, the mystery around this despicable and horrendous murderer remains unsolved.